Hello everyone, and welcome also from my side to this second edition of MEF CONNECTS WHOLESALE. So I'm Suzy Menneret. I'm the Program Director for Wholesale for the Mobile Ecosystem Forum. And I'm really happy today to welcome some of the key stakeholders of the wholesale industry. I'm happy to introduce to you Nadir Patel, Senior Manager of International Roaming within Omantel. Nadir, can you? Hello, Nadir. Thank you. Great to have you with us. Great to have you on board. Pleasure to have you here. My second guest is Thangaraj Durairaj. I guess some of you know him. He's the head of carrier voice within Vodafone Global Enterprise. Hello, Tanga. Good to see you.
Thanks.
Can you hear us?
Absolutely. Very loud and clear. Thank you, Suzy. Thanks.
Then we have Bas van Heyningen. Hopefully. He's
Hello.
the manager new business for iBasis. Hi, Bas. Great to have you with us today. Thank you for accepting to join this session. And last but not least, Mike Mills, Director of Cloud Infrastructure Partners at Global Telecom, who took the time during his holidays to confirm his attendance. So grateful to you, Mike, to be all here. So,
hi, Suzy. Great to be here.
Hi, and welcome to this panel. So today on the menu, we have Cloudification in the world of wholesale voice. The title sounds very philosophical, but just as a starting point, cloudification in wholesale voice, what are we really talking about? Mike or Nadia, maybe just give us a hint of what really are we talking about?
So hi everybody, and it's Mike here. From my perspective, Suzy, I think we're talking about how the sort of changing landscape of how voice is provided to end customers and utilized by end customers impacts on us as an ecosystem. And I guess what do I mean by that? Well, if you look at the different ways that people are now consuming voice services, it isn't any longer a circuit switched approach. So you've got other variations and examples. You know, we all use WhatsApp, we all use Facebook Messenger. Most of us now use VoIP platforms, and all of that really stems from a cloudification of the industry, which leads, I think, into a discussion and conversation we've got today around how does that impact on the wholesale element of voice.
Would you agree, Nadir, on the statement of Mike here?
Yes, definitely. In fact, we have already seen voice services moving towards the cloud. In terms of the cloud PABX systems that we are seeing, a lot of companies are developing and implementing in their respective countries. We also see certain companies already providing a wholesale service. I mean, I could name so many of them which are right now available in the market, who are offering a wholesale voice solution on the cloud for maybe the end customers now. So we as wholesale providers need to keep an eye on what's happening here.
So good transition you're offering me here. So from a wholesale carrier perspective, is this a reality today? And when and should really wholesale carriers and operators start? So maybe that question goes to Bas and Tanga. Sorry.
Shall I start, Tanga, if you're okay? So
yeah,
we see different levels, right? Where the wholesale world is affected by the cloud. We have the platforms itself, so the distribution layer of the minutes, the platforms, the SPCs, which are now more virtual than always fixed. But we also have the content that is now becoming more and more. That's changing into UC, Unified Communication Solutions, rather than just sending calls over a network. And I think there is a role for wholesale players in both levels, both on the network level as well as the content level.
Right. Yes. Yeah. Suzy, I think from Vodafone point of view, I think what we can share, what we can see in the market happening is in the wholesale. The market, we all know exactly what's happening to international voice, and then because here we are talking about typically services. So that means brings its own challenge, because it is not one of the high growth, high margin industry. That means the cloudification concept actually comes in handy to see exactly how do we actually take advantage of the benefits of the cloudification, whether in terms of network or in terms of applications, so that it brings the scalability and flexibility and then also cost efficiency to run the services.
And do you think, from a wholesale carrier perspective, do you think that carriers are ready to jump into this wholesale cloudification environment? You were talking about some challenges. Are wholesale carriers going to put all their assets in the cloud? How do you see that shift moving on towards cloudification? And
Okay.
anyone wants to take that question? It's an open one.
Well, if you don't mind, I can share some thoughts.
Oh, go on, Nadir.
I believe that as wholesale voice carriers, we still love our switches, we still love our point of presences, we still love and boast about all the investments that we have made across the globe. And when we meet operators, we tell that, we can connect in Amsterdam, we can connect in Singapore. Now, it's going to be a mindset shift that when you can tell an operator, I can connect to you on the cloud. But as wholesale providers, yes, we need to gear up for this. The change is happening. As I said, we are already seeing certain companies coming up with cloudification solutions for wholesale voice. And as wholesale providers, in fact, there are big names here with iBasis and Vodafone, even Gamma. So we need to gear up and prepare for the next change that is going to happen on the wholesale voice.
And Suzy, I can probably add some interesting context here. So sort of 5 years ago, most of our wholesale revenue was from interconnecting with carriers, specifically for the UK to provide IDD type traffic. Now I would say 85 to 90% of it's coming from connecting some of those bigger cloud providers in. So that sort of mindset step change from, and revenue change for us, certainly in the UK market, has happened extensively, and all of our growth in that area is coming from people that are born in the cloud and are looking at localized expertise and provision of services to that market specifically. So I think to answer your question, I think now is the time to do it, and most people on here are probably seeing something similar as a lot of those very big global providers move towards local relationships to provide sort of best of breed quality.
Yeah. And to add to that, I like Mike's statements that we started all with the DIDs, the IDD traffic, but the goal is still the same. We still want to be as close to the enterprise and to the end user as we can. And since they are migrating now to AWS, Azure, and you name all the clouds, I think for the wholesale branch there is also an opportunity with lower cost, as Nadir already mentioned, and Thanga, that you can come closer to enterprise without having to service enterprise yourselves, moving to the new direction. And it's not necessary to switch everything tomorrow. We all know that. It's regionally aligned. It's aligned per market. But I agree that if you wait too long with it, you might miss the boat.
No, that's pretty interesting. So you mentioned a few challenges, a few opportunities here. What do you see first as opportunities for a wholesale carrier? I mean, we talked about a significant mind shift. It's a big move to go onto the cloud, but what are the opportunities that carriers can seek by moving to the cloud? And is it eventually an inevitable industry push to some extent? Because if they don't go, then they might miss the boat. How do you see those? I guess these are the questions that a lot of carriers must be asking themselves. But in terms of opportunities, in terms of challenges, what's at stake here? Do you think? Well, probably starting with Thangaraj again.
Yeah, thanks, Suzy. I think I was listening to all my panel members. I think it is yeah, everything is whatever they shared is absolutely right. Saying that okay, there is a way how actually we are going to do maybe slightly different, not necessarily we all have to jump one ship to another ship, and because it may be subject to the different regions, and then also the operators like us, when we actually have your own retail base, you have a you may actually have a combination of private cloud and public cloud, because there are some applications it may be much easier for you to do it on a private cloud, some of them may be on a public cloud. So I think so this is exactly what we see, that it is not actually the question of whether we will do it. I think we may all actually eventually slowly move into this area, only because I think one of the panel members said before, because mostly every voice is becoming a data, and then voice is also more increasingly used by the next gen type of users, not the traditional players. So I think the road to the end may actually be different depending on which part of the world you are, what type of the customer segment you're with, but it is the way how actually we'll all be moving towards to.
Yeah, Bas, how would you see those opportunities and challenges on the iBasis side?
So, we had long discussions about that. Is it now a threat or an opportunity? Obviously, from the network perspective, it is an opportunity because it's saving cost. It's allowing to do more with less. But also, we've actually been focusing more on the content side. How can we enable our traditional customers, which are carriers, to become part of this cloud? So we are working with. We've built a portfolio actually that allows to integrate with Microsoft and Zoom, for example, to do direct routing or Zoom direct routing, because we see those new ecosystems provide a lot of new potential, and that is something that, we see wholesale is normally a little bit ahead of the domestic departments. So this will be a very good opportunity to try it before you buy it.
So try and buy, and I guess a new environment, a new ecosystem. According to you, Mike, how do you see a wholesale carrier differentiating themselves in this environment? I guess there's a lot of there's a lot of different players to be taken into account this time. It's a pretty different world from the traditional wholesale voice market. So what do you think is at stake there?
So I think that's a great question, Suzy. I think that there's a couple of things I'd probably want to call out that I think give carriers a really significant advantage over a lot of other people. And the first one's the thorny subject of regulation and law. If you look at what's coming in the UK with there's a bill coming in, a telecom security bill due to come in, and that essentially prevents carriers putting large elements of their estate into public cloud environments. And as carriers, we're very used to operating in that environment, and I think that gives us an opportunity to be able to cope with the rigor that comes with being a licensed regulated operator, whereas some of the smaller providers are less able and don't have the muscle, resource, scale to be able to do that. So I think that's the first point I'd call out. I think the other area of opportunity to look at, and we've been a sort of provider of cloudification for voice for well over 15 years in one form or another, and we're really early into the market. I think you're seeing new business models emerge that to me suggests that a lot of these big software vendors, if you look across the key ones, your Amazons, your Googles, your Microsofts, they're all delivering in-country numbering services termination capability at the moment, but it's clearly painful for them. And what's now emerging, and I think represents a great opportunity for carriers, are things like the bring your own carrier model, which we're seeing emerge out of the US for a lot of these guys, where they want the route to market and relationships that the carriers have got, and the scale and the expertise in managing the local landscapes. So they want them to continue to provide that to customers. So I would say over the next 2 years, you would expect to see a myriad of bring your own carrier, direct routing, operator connect type models emerge out of that software world. That I think represents a great opportunity for telcos. I think the challenge we'll all have is those guys come to the sort of game with their own rules on how you engage and how you interconnect and how you work it, and that doesn't always lend itself well to a heavily regulated environment. And certainly some of the challenges we're seeing, and I guess you guys are probably seeing as well, is, you know, those big cloud providers actively want to avoid being regulated, yet are providing regulated services. So we're at this really interesting point. But for me, that represents a really significant opportunity for the people on this panel to capitalize on that as an opportunity.
I mean, but Nadir, we had this conversation offline on regulation and how that may be a topic in this cloudification of wholesale voice. What's your take at what Mike just mentioned, and also bringing your insights from Omantel in terms of anything that is regulatory based?
Yes, so regulations definitely play a very key role in how they'll enable our wholesale, as wholesale partner carriers, to participate and take this discussion further ahead and put it into action. Our regulations in the region clearly say that you cannot host any of the customer content outside the country. So the cloud has to be in the country. Now, that itself becomes a bit challenging, because then all the Middle East carriers will have to ensure that their clouds are in the country. And that brings the question to then interoperability. How are we going to exchange information data with each other? So it gets a bit tricky when it comes to the regulatory part. It's a bit like what I can say permanent roaming in the roaming business. We all talk about it, but when you talk to our regulators, they say, hang on, we still need to get back to you on these things. And there is a cloud itself on the topic of what do you define as permanent roaming, and how do we tackle the permanent roaming issue. So I think it's very much similar to what is happening on the cloud side also. We still need to see how we can get the regulators across the region to align on one understanding and set up industry-based best practices and solutions.
Interesting. Sorry, I thought somebody else was going to go on. So very, very, very interesting. I have a series of questions or hot topics that you guys were quite keen to tap into, which I think are very valid. We talked a lot about security up to now in this event, security and cloud for wholesale carriers. What does that mean? How do we handle this from a wholesale carrier perspective? Tanga, maybe?
Yeah, I think again, Suzy, I think we can look at it two different elements here, right? One is the network level, and the next one is the service level. I think the service is the one which, we touched upon some other cases. I think I'll look at the network level. Network level is going to be cloudification. Obviously, is the path most of us are either thinking or maybe started doing. Not okay. Just from Vodafone point of view, this is one of the route which we'll be taking, at least to interconnect with our customers. Only because, like some other examples, Baz and others mentioned before, is about how do we actually integrate interconnect with our customers. Like Nadir was saying, like we used to talk about I have 20 POPs. Is it still relevant? And that is something we are challenging. Is this because by creating a POPs, I think we're just limiting ourselves to specific location and then unable to even scale at the speed to which our customers are able to connect to us. So this is one element which we're moving away. We're thinking about virtualizing this connection. The security of that can be protected either by using our own, some of this communication technology automatically. Because when you talk about most of the voice communications, we do on a data link end-to-end encrypted. Okay, so this is one of the things at the carrier level. What we need to think about it is, should we actually even adopt into this TLS, SRTP, this kind of mechanism? We don't do that today. And we probably choose to do that between the selective players, because it also brings its own complexities. I think that this is apart from just protecting your network, securing your connection on a cloud transport level. We can also think about these methods for the network level integrations. Whether we spoke about the numbers, can this be hosted? Okay. On the wholesale point of view, this is one of the ideas being floated, and then which is one of the requirements from the next gen type of customers, right? Or hyperscalers. Yes, I think this comes with its own manage it, like I think Mike mentioned about regulatory, and then apart from the security of it. The security becomes even more critical because how we are going to protect the usage of the numbers with the legitimate users is something we can actually, what I'm struggling to say that what's the right word for this? How do we actually make sure the fraud doesn't happen when you actually host this kind of services, so that anybody else, not just only the number owners, even the users of the number are not being hacked? Because this we do see that happening today in the industry. Yeah, numbers which has been sold to one player has been hacked by their own internal systems and then being abused. This is something we still actually have to understand and then develop an industry level, standards.
If I could just make an observation comment as well, Suzy, and we saw this in the UK maybe a couple of weeks ago, that there was a sustained DDoS attack on a bunch of UK-based providers and operators that host a fair amount of their equipment in the public cloud environments. And those attacks actually originated and were initiated from someone else in that public cloud environment. So there's a whole security question, I think, around governance and the challenges those environments bring. Is yes, they're eminently scalable, but if that scale is a significant threat to service availability, then that's actually a real challenge and something I think as a group of sort of businesses we need to get our heads around. You could have infinite scale in a public cloud environment and simultaneously DDoS attack pretty much everybody globally that you want it to, and I don't think we've considered that, and I think similarly to Tanga's point, I think the whole dial-through fraud scenario, which is an issue well known to everyone on this call, I think that's going to happen irrespective. But I don't think yet we've really figured out and thought of a way forward in how we look to mitigate that more in that sort of public cloud environment, specifically in the virtualization piece. So I think there's been some very real examples of that in the last few weeks that I just thought would bring this conversation to life.
No, it's a fair point, and again, I mean, I'm probably now going to address Bas and Nadir on this topic. How do you, I guess, Bas, you were saying earlier that there's a lot of head scratching around cloudification in iBasis. I suppose security, fraud protection, and so on are again topics to be looked into. According to you, and also a question added to Nadir, I mean, I guess, what are you doing within your own organizations? And really, is this just a matter that is to be dealt with in your organizations, and how can cooperation or collaboration in the industry should be playing around those things?
Shall I start again, Suzy?
Go on, Bas.
So if you look at our internal organization, where we are looking to hire and where is the growth, is especially on fraud prevention and on security. And so we launched the fraud log portfolio. We rebranded it, I think, a year ago. And we had to think about that because it was not just the service anymore for termination. It became much bigger. So that is where we have extended the team, as well as launched a complete new security portfolio, which is part of our value-added portfolio with one of my colleagues, who is almost in burnout because he got so many requests out of the market. How does it work? How do you protect it? And what can you do? And I think it's been mentioned by Tanga. It's two ways. It's on the network, but it's also on the on the service itself. We start with the numbers. And with the traffic termination, obviously, A number, B number. That's how we always started. And then in the future, with the security services, we will look more, and we will have more to offer on public and private cloud security. which I completely agree with Mike. That public cloud, that's a beast that has to be defined still. What needs to be done there?
Nadir, the cloud is a beast.
No doubts about it. It's a beast. Just how do we monetize the beast? Not tame it, but how do we monetize it? That's the question. On the security part, yes, of course, all operators today, be it in the region or globally, are investing heavily into how we can secure our network, be it in-house developments or resorting to partners who are champions or who are experts in this field. So obviously, and I think one of the key factors for a wholesale voice business to move towards the cloud would be security. That how can we ensure that our mobile numbers don't get traded or our numbering levels don't get traded easily on the cloud? How can we ensure that we can try and reduce the frauds that we see today happening on the traditional networks? Is there any way, because since you're moving to cloud, cloud is also computing, right? So will we be able to use artificial intelligence and machine learnings to counter the challenges that we face today? Despite having firewalls and a lot of other investments made in security, we still find leakages happening. And also, how can we add to that also, the billing perspective? Can billing also be made simplified once a wholesale voice business moves to the cloud? Instead of having separate billing engines, is it possible that within the cloud itself we can make use of this? So that's where I think my thoughts are.
Yeah, so plenty of unknown, plenty of questions, and probably lots of technology that can help sort of make things clearer in the future, but not necessarily a lot of answers today. One of you, when we had this conversation offline, mentioned, well, it would be good to have a nice discussion around the cloudification, the impact of cloudification on T2, T3 players wanting to get on the cloud. Anyone who wants to give some more heads up on this and give their thoughts around that? Maybe I think that was you, Mike and Tanga, who had this, if I'm not wrong, who had this topic on their keen to discuss this.
Yeah, I don't mind going, Suzy. I think if you're a smaller operator right now, that I think as this all gets bigger, I think it becomes more and more challenging on the products and services that you currently offer to be sort of relevant and commercially competitive. So I think if you're a tier 2, tier 3, tier 4 provider, I think now it's never been a more important time to really look at how you differentiate your portfolio of services. And what you lose in scale, you make up for in agility. And certainly, if I was in that position, I'd be focusing on what other services you can get to market for your customers to consume as quickly as possible. But I think as this all gets bigger, and I think the bigger your network is, the more power you have with that cloudification journey. And it's an expensive journey to go on and maintain. So you need to think about other ways to monetize yourself in the market, I would say.
Right. Yeah. So maybe I will add a couple of more points to Mike's one on this, Suzy, because I think the tier 2, tier 3 are the one going to be more tempted to go into this, right? Because of the ease of going into and then deploying the services for them. But then I think what it also brings up is the different type of challenges, exactly how the standards are going to be maintained if you have to standard and security of the services. It's going to be maintained between those services. I think this is something we have to think through it and the complexity around it, how easy for us to integrate and then start adopting all those new emerging players who are actually going to be more tempted to go to the cloud without having the due diligence, which possibly established players will have to do it, because you can't just shut down something and go to the cloud without understanding all the plus and minus. Whereas the smaller players may be just tempted to do it because of the benefit it brings in immediately. But how do we correct them is going to be a question which we need to understand.
Yeah, go on, Mas.
Yeah, so it's a very interesting question, right? Because these companies are often very, very agile compared to tier 1 operators. They don't have 20 layers of decision making, but on the other hand, they don't have the budgets. So we are doing some demonstrations with some of tier 2, tier 3 operators, and this is quite scary because in the cloud it also means that you don't see the traffic anymore. So we are trying to work with them on some solutions where they still own the customer. They don't see the traffic anymore on their network, but they still are able to be part of the ecosystem. And I think that is a very interesting shift compared to the traditional way of wholesaling. That you, although you don't own the assets anymore in every occasion, you can still have a very strong and agile enterprise play, for example, with these new cloud solutions, and that so that might be an opportunity for them as well.
I guess it's as you said, Bas. I mean, and also Mike and Tanga. I mean, it's different players, a very different ecosystem. And it's pretty challenging for traditional wholesale or big carriers to move into that play. What are the must-haves or the key priorities that those that wholesale voice carriers should focus on to make sure, to ensure they are best equipped in this new specific environment? Do you believe? I don't know. Who wants to take that nice question? Maybe.
I'm happy to give you a view, Suzy. I think for me it's two things. So it's leveraging what you've got where you've got it. So as global network providers, the more breadth and reach you have in terms of numbering and availability and all that sort of stuff, that's actually a massive advantage. And using those assets, I think, is really important for our sort of sustainable long-term future. I think if you think about what the voice termination market will look like in 5 years' time, when 60 to 70% of the calls will be on net between teams and other things, then that means that we probably have to leverage some of the other assets we've got, bids and access and connectivity and all of that other stuff. So I think that would be the first point I'd make. And then I think the second is the sort of partnership approach. So as a community, we're all interconnected physically. We all, we understand how to operate in this landscape. And I think having the map, for want of a better word, and understanding how we can all collaborate in maybe different ways than we would have done historically, and thinking about the problem in a different way. I think they're the things that really sort of provide the way forward for us as a community.
Okay, I don't see any questions from the audience, but we are conscious of time. We don't have that much time left, but as a nice follow-up on what Mike just said, I would be quite keen to hear the four of you in terms of how do you see voice cloudification moving forward in the future? How do you see this market in a few years from now? Maybe Nadir?
Well, from an operator wholesale perspective, I definitely see that this market will involve a lot of collaboration, coordination, and utilizing the relationships that we as carriers today, all 3-4 of us, have with the cloud providers of the world. The Googles, the AWS, the Microsoft. We are all connected to them in some way or the other. We host them either in our data centers, or we provide them cross connects when they try to get into the country. So I think that is where. But that is where the future is. I think as wholesale voice providers and as incumbent operators who invest in infrastructure, we will definitely have a one step ahead in terms of moving towards cloudification of wholesale voice.
Interesting. So collaboration, here a lot, partnerships. Would you go along those lines, Bas?
Yeah, I think that's the only way, because no one can build everything themselves, and having those big cloud providers operate with each other, I don't think they want that. They don't want to be a telecom company. So there's a big role for us to also help them to connect the world, like we always have done.
You take, Tanga?
Suzy, Suzy, I think before we end session, I think absolutely this is for most of us, right? Because I think you might mention one thing, because in the next 3 to 4 years time, maybe 60% of today's traffic might just become a data, and we have 5G and all of them happening. So we also have to think about, when we talk about this trend, how our current contract structure is going to change, because not just only the network and connection between us, and then also operating model, even the current contract, for the way how it's been written for the interconnected connection, might also have to be changing. So this is going to be very interesting and very important next couple of years for us to define and move forward.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah, I think the last point from me is probably a fairly topical one. I think we should probably all just reassess our commercial models. I think in a world, I'll give you some examples. So we're now looking at an approach where we don't charge for capacity or even minutes. You charge a sort of fixed fee with things included, DID, termination of minutes in specific areas, and we should think about whether the commercial models we've got are sustainable and viable in 3 or 4 years' time. And we're thinking long and hard at Gamma about how do we continue to make sure that we're generating the revenues and margins that we need when 40, 50, 60% of your traffic is going to be on net between those providers and themselves and their users on those services. So I think that's sort of certainly at the forefront of our thinking in terms of this whole cloudification piece, and I'd encourage other operators to begin to think in a similar way.
I think that's a nice wrap up. Surely there'll be more talks around cloudification in our upcoming activities in the future, as this is definitely a topic that is lining up for the industry with all its opportunities, challenges, and different areas of investigation that it will involve. I'd like to thank you, the 4 of you, to have accepted to have me as a humble moderator to host this session. It was a great pleasure, at least from my side, to have you all 4 on board, and I really look forward to exchanging with you on this topic very soon. Thank you so much from my side and from the.
Thanks, Suzy. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Cheers.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.